to another episode of Wizard Goes Boom. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about War Machine mass combat rules as a tie-in to some of my previous videos discussing D&D as a war game. So as I talked about players getting strongholds and about factions and the political intrigue they can get involved into once they have strongholds, it seems like an inevitability that mass combat of some sort will happen. It might be that they need to take a castle so they can make it their own. And so they're going to need some kind of rules for siege. Or they may make a few enemies along the way of some of those factions, and those scores will need to be settled on the battlefield. So the rule system I picked, probably because it's the easiest one to pick up, is War Machine. Now there's also Chainmail and Battle System, but those are a little bit more hardcore. And War Machine itself is pretty edition agnostic. You can really use it with any edition of D&D, whether it's original D&D or BX or BECME or even 5th edition or D&D 2024. It's pretty easy to plug it in. War Machine is also abstract as a battle system. It requires only a little bit of math, but it'll cover battles on the battlefield and sieges as well. So it does not require miniatures. Of course, you can have them to role play out the experience, but they're not required, and they certainly won't affect the outcomes. Chainmail and Battle System, on the other hand, do require miniatures, and they're a little bit more crunchy. But I find War Machine to fit into most situations. So where can you find the War Machine rules? Well, they were reprinted in the 1991 D&D Rules Cyclopedia. You can also find them, a form of them, in the D&D Rules Cyclopedia Retro clone called Dark Dungeons, and I'll post a link to it. And if you want, you can also get the PDF to the D&D Rules Cyclopedia from DriveThruRPG. You could also, if you want, look it up on archive.org. The War Machine makes some assumptions. One is that all troops have a level of quality to them that can improve or drop with time and experience. It also considers other factors, terrain, weather, in addition to quality of troops. And luck also comes into it. There will be some dice rolls there. But most importantly, a character does not need to know the tactics of war. You can be a complete novice at it and still win a battle using War Machine. Most important factors are things like how experienced your troops are, how trained are they, what are the levels and abilities of the officers, how good are their equipment, and do you have any kind of special troops, like wizards casting spells, like Fireball, or flying above the battlefield and using them as artillery from there. Now, it's important to note here that, again, this is abstract, but you can role play out the experience so that your players can enjoy it. For example, you can have one of the magic users cast Levitate or Fly above the battlefield and start hurling fireballs at the enemy. So it's mathematically already counted in to the scores, but the individual character doing that won't actually affect anything. Again, it's abstract, but it is figured into the calculations of this war machine. Other things that come into play is what percentage are your troops mounted versus on foot. How many of the creatures or mounts in your force can actually fly? That's another thing that's considered. Each of those things has a certain score attached to them, and you sort of add them up, and that gives you a battle rating. Then, of course, there's bonuses and penalties to that battle rating given certain circumstances, like troop ratio. Are your troops outnumbered, or do you outnumber the enemy? Things like morale. How much do your troops like you as a leader? Is the environment favorable or unfavorable? The terrain. Is it high altitude, low altitude? Is it forest, mountains? Is it a stronghold? It also considers even things like immunities to certain attacks. Like if you're fighting perhaps an army of undead, could be some of those undead are immune to damage unless you have a magical weapon or a silvered weapon. It also considers things like fatigue. Things like actual tactics, battlefield tactics, is an optional part of War Machine, but it can also affect your scores as well if you decide to use them. The luck portion of it comes into rolling some dice. You roll a D100, and then you add to that your battle rating. And when you compare the two results, battle rating results, you'll determine sort of a winner. It might not outright determine a winner, but you'll figure things like casualties and such. Now, the siege portion of War Machine is called Siege Machine. Pretty simple. And that actually takes into consideration things like how well supplied your fortification is if you're the defender, or if you're the one doing the assault. Let's say you're trying to take a stronghold for your player characters. So it's going to depend on several things. And what will factor into it, things like ballista, catapults, trebuchets, whether there's going to be bombardment or whether you're going to use ladders, and the strength of the walls is going to be important. And they get certain rooms and certain structures get armor class ratings. Another thing that Siege Machine takes into consideration the amount of clerics that you have that can heal or create food and water. Another thing to consider in the War Machine is also initiative. Who gets to act first? So much like the small tactical combat of D&D, this is at a level higher. Small tactical combat of D&D is also a little bit abstract as well, with things like armor class and hit points. This just kind of scales that concept up. Now, there's some retro clones out there that also have their own sort of mass combat systems. One particularly good one is Adventure Conquer King system, or AXE. And then there's also Hyperborea, which uses a variant of War Machine. If you wanted to play around with War Machine, there's also a Dungeons & Dragons module for it called CM1 Test of the Warlords by Douglas Niles. So I think you'll find War Machine covers most situations. And out of the other options available, like chainmail or battle system, it's easier to use. It's because it's just math. That's all it is. Basic math. Add some numbers together, roll some dice, and you have your results. And you'll also find that it takes a lot of realistic things into consideration. So I would say give it a shot and let me know what you think of War Machine.